Now, Louis started walking towards Phoenix. He was trying to get to Phoenix when a man stopped behind him in a car and asked him if he wanted to ride to Phoenix. And Louis said, I do, but I want to see Doubtful Canyon first. The old man asked him what he knew about Doubtful Canyon. Louis then told him that he was working with an old man who actually became an Apache. This old man who Louis met, was living in Texas with his family when the Apaches attacked his home, killed his whole family, but decided to keep him alive and basically turn him into an Apache. And this man rode horses with Geronimo and Cochise. The old man thought that was crazy that he met this man who had been raised by the Apaches and rode with Geronimo and Cochise. And he said, well, if you ever need a ride, then ask for me. My name is Jeff Milton. People will know me. And this was really cool to Louis because Jeff Milton was a very, very popular sheriff in the West at that time. So this was just an amazing coincidence that he had run into Jeff Milton. But back to the story about Doubtful Canyon. This man, who had been taken by the Apaches, was then taken to his first war party at about 12 years old. And around that age, you could be taken to a war party, but you couldn't fight. You just had to cook meals, tend to the horses for the warriors that were fighting, and you could, of course, watch the battle. Now, the Apaches knew that there were going to be a stagecoach coming through Doubtful Canyon, and so they were going to attack it. And the reason why it was called Doubtful Canyon was because it was doubtful that you were going to get out alive. Now, this stagecoach was part of the Free Thompson Party, and as they were coming through, they ended up encountering the hundreds of Apache who were lining the canyon walls and started firing at them. The stagecoach stopped, the 7 men got out, and they hid behind a rocky knoll. Now, these men barely had any food, had no water, which was a really dumb idea because there's no water for miles going through this canyon, and there's, of course, no way to get food. But they had thousands of rounds of ammunition. So for 3 days, these men hid out behind the rocky knoll with their rifles, shooting constantly. And there would be silence for hours, and then all of a sudden, an Apache would pop out, and he would die. He would get shot to shreds, basically. In this canyon, it was over 100 degrees. It was super dry, super hot, and there's no wind going through the canyon. So you just imagine there, sitting behind a rocky knoll with your rifle, knowing that you're probably going to die. There's only 6 other men with you. You have no food, no water, and you are just dying. You are dying. And you know you're not going to get out of this alive. Now, each day, one of these men would get killed. It was basically 1 or 2 died on the first and second day. And throughout each night, the Apaches wouldn't actually fight because they believed that if you died during the night, your soul was forced to wander this area forever so that your soul wouldn't be free. And because of this, the 7 men actually took advantage of this and ended up building a sort of like fortification to make sure they had at least a bit more room to fight. And they couldn't actually hide behind the stagecoach because all the rounds that the Apaches would fire could easily get through the few inches of wood. But on the 3rd day in the afternoon, again, it was super hot, unbelievably hot. There were a few more gunshots, and that was it. It was silence. Now, presumably, these men had shot themselves, knowing that if they were captured alive, they would have had a very, very terrible death. Much, much worse. And at the end of this, all 7 men died, and about 130 to 150 Apaches died, which is pretty good for a standoff like that.